or to watch a mother moose nuzzle her calf, and to share those sights with students. Actually, one of my favorite things is to watch students watch monkeys for the first time. Travel is both a metaphor for life and a full experience of life. It can be challenging, awe-inspiring, exhausting, and exhilarating. Now, St. Augustine is credited with saying that the world is a book, and those who do not travel read only one page. Travel is not new to our modern era, where it's been part of human experience for over 100,000 years, if our mitochondrial DNA has anything to say about it. Homo sapiens has been traveling, dispersing out of southern Africa for at least 100,000 years. Now, there are many opportunities for people to travel. And at Millikan, we have a biology course or set of courses that we call Ecological Journeys. Students either can take them as, if they're a philosophy major or some other major besides in the sciences, they take it as Biology 280. If they're a biology major, they can take it as Biology 380, and of course there are more requirements for the 380. The course has three main parts. The first part, of course, is the ecological relationships, principles that we learn in class. And we typically spend several, an hour and a half a week in class studying principles of the place we're going to be visiting. We travel to unique physical environments with interesting species and places that get people out of their comfort zones and allow them to apply the concepts that we learn in lecture in our classrooms. A second part is that the biology majors do independent projects while they're on the site. And they need to plan these before we go so we have the right equipment, but usually they are on plan D, E, or F by the time they actually do the project because things change. Martins come in and eat all the little pikas in Alaska or something in one of our sites. But individuals then are able to apply specific concepts that they're interested in that unique habitat. And then the third portion of the ecological journey is to become involved in ongoing projects involving local population of people, and to consider who our visit enriches besides us. One of my real passions is to work for environmental justice. Unfortunately, the poorest people of the world suffer the most from environmental degradation. And here in the United States, we're 5% of the world's population, and we use 30% of the Earth's resources. If everybody in the world came to have the same standard of living that we do, it would take 6 Earths to support us. So what are we going to do? We need to recognize the moral right of all humans to improve their lives and not be trapped into a constant cycle of poverty. Vandermeer and Perfecto wrote a book called Breakfast of Biodiversity, the diversity of living systems, and equated, when we drink our coffee in the morning, or we slice a banana onto our cereal, or even when we put sugar on that cereal, or drink hot chocolate, all of those things can be equated to cutting down the tropical rainforest, because those things are all growing as cash crops in areas that used to be rainforest. E.O. Wilson has said that what we're doing right now with our environment is like burning Renaissance paintings to cook dinner. Now, there are lots of other fuels. We don't have to use those Renaissance paintings. We need to find other ways. One of the places that we go is South Africa. And South Africa is a country with 11 official languages. It's a very diverse human area. And The cradle of civilization, the cradle of mankind is there. That's where man originated. And we know that all people have the same intrinsic worth. And there's a word in some of the African languages known as Ubuntu. And what this means is that there's interconnectedness among people. That people are people because of other people. And anything you do that diminishes any human being diminishes all. Now, this is a biology course, and we get to see lots of really cool plants and animals. And here are some of them. We see quite a few elephants, the African penguin, and then the little rock hyrax or dassy there, king protea. Pretty strange stuff. And there are two of those pictures of organisms that are closely related. What do you think the little dassy or rock hyrax is related to? Yeah.
Is it a really interesting squirrel?
It sure looks like it, doesn't it? But it has tusks instead of flat incisors. Its closest living relative is an elephant. Looks more like a groundhog, doesn't it? But it also has feet that are kind of elephant-like. It doesn't have claws. It has toes like an elephant. Has a lot of, it doesn't have the rodent characteristics, but it's certainly different from elephants too. We get to see some of the organisms that you probably think of when you think of Africa. There's I don't have a telephoto, but that picture of the leopard with the impala in the tree I took. We were in a Jeep, and the leopard really didn't care much about us, but it was a little unnerving that we were close enough that I could get a decent picture of a leopard. Of course, the zebra and giraffe, lots of really cool animals. A good place to observe interactions between organisms. And the zebra and the giraffe hang out together. Zebras are kind of skitterish. And if they sense a predator nearby, they take off, which warns the giraffes. You know, giraffes, when they get a drink, they have to spread their front legs and go down like this. If they're getting a drink, and they're not near zebras, they might not see what's sneaking up on them. But they can see way above what the zebras can see. So zebras hang out with giraffes, and it works out well for both of them. Here are just some of the accommodations and our transportation. Sometimes we camp, sometimes we stay in rondables or huts. This is an area, we do both game drives and hikes. And one of the things we have to watch out for on our hikes are baboons. And these young men were out pushing the baboons away from our dormitories. The baboons are known for their aggressiveness sometimes when they've been around humans too much. And at one point, I had to leave for a little while, and I told the students, make sure you keep the doors locked. And we were in a little cabin that was way away from any people. And so they didn't think they really needed to keep the doors locked. But right after they took in groceries, a great big baboon came walking in. He opened the door, he walked in, grabbed the bread, grabbed the bananas, at everybody, and he walked out with whatever he wanted. And then they started locking the doors, because he didn't have a key. He could work the knobs, but he didn't have a key, fortunately. The Cape province of South Africa is extremely diverse in plants and animals. Table Mountain there has over 2,000 species of plants that occur nowhere else in the world. And in fact, the little bit of land that makes the Cape of Southern Africa is one of the 6 floral kingdoms of the world. That's pretty amazing. Just a little strip has an awful lot of different species. Lots of weird stuff. The group there is under a tree that is in the poinsettia family. And then the other tree is in the lily family. Beautiful flowers that are kind of like in the desert where they flower in April here in Arizona. In August we get lots of flowers in southern Africa. Let me point it that way. Another aspect is cultural studies, and you can see on the far right are some San paintings on rocks that were done thousands of years ago, some of the earliest known human art. There's a Nibdeli village that we visited with beautiful geometric designs in their homes. And you can see a huge difference in the country. It's very first world in some areas. You see the Cape Town itself is very built up, beautiful shops. Actually, South Africa has better phone service, cellular service, than we do. I was never out of cellular service there. When we go to Alaska, we can't use our cell phones. But then right next to those nice, fancy, first world places, you see shacks full of people, they call them informal settlements, abject poverty. And while we're there, we visit one of the townships known as the Langa Township. It has people of all economic classes, but the blacks in South Africa were not allowed to live in Cape Town. In the 1980s, apartheid is very recent. So this woman, Monica Lalone, decided to start a restaurant in her home because the only options for her for work were to be a servant. And she decided to start this restaurant, and it started going pretty well. So she started training young women and young men to be cooks and servers, and gradually expanded her home restaurant to where it now seats about 150 people. And it's a great stop for people to get a good taste of the national cuisines. And I say cuisines because it's so variable. If you get 11 official languages, you know you're going to have a lot of diversity in food too. And on that plate, there's ostrich and kudu, which is a big antelope, mealies, a corn dish, several curries, and narrow-mindedness. It's a good way for people to get out of their comfort zones and realize, like for a lot of our Millikan students, they think they're poor if they don't get a new car every 3 years. They don't realize what real poverty is until they see it, and maybe even stay in some of these townships. Here we have students that are working with some of the orphans or children who have been placed in orphanages because their parents have AIDS. It's a huge problem in Southern Africa. Over a third of the women aged 20 to 40 have HIV or are HIV positive. Grandmothers are raising a lot of their grandchildren because the parent generation is gone. And one of the places that we take a lot of stuff to and visit is Solomon's Haven. And it is a place, not a government agency, but a place where children are welcome, especially abused children. And Mama Maria takes them in. I am going to nominate her for a CNN Hero Award this year. They have raised over 250 children with no government help, but with help from people who take them things and help them send children to school. It's not a free education. You have to pay about $1,100, she has to pay about $1,100 a year to send each child to school. So it takes a lot of help. And this is her crew and our crew after working with her, preparing meals and taking the clothing and such. And then this is our visit to Robben Island. It's Nelson Mandela's cell. The guides on Robben Island were former prisoners, and this is Cecil, and he was imprisoned in the same group as Nelson Mandela. So he had a lot of stories to tell us. The Sesotho people of southern Africa have a saying, Ho Shemaya Hobono, which means traveling is learning. And that's what we're working on doing. And this summer, we're going to be going to Alaska. And we camp, makes it a pretty inexpensive trip, and get to see lots of different kinds of habitats and lots of different animals. Get to fish a little too. This one I call the three bears. These young ladies brought bikinis because they wanted to take a photo of themselves in their bikinis on a glacier. They did. It was a good group. As I said, one of the things that we do is projects. And the project that this graph shows is the following of the sun of the mountain avens, that little yellow flower. You know, in the summer in Alaska, the days are about 22 hours long when we're in the Denali area. The sun comes up, never gets very high in the sky, comes up about 2:30 in the morning, goes down about 12:30 at night, the next night. And so the flowers need to follow the sun all day. Many of them do. And one of my students found that if she painted the area about this far down from the flower with whiteout, she could keep the plant from following the sun. And so she did that, and then she measured the temperature of the flowers that faced the sun and the ones that did not. And it was significantly warmer if they faced the sun, which resulted in significantly more pollinators visiting, much more likely to set seed. When we go to Costa Rica, I try to expose students not only to the fascinating organisms in their habitats, but also to people who are deeply committed to finding and implementing alternative ways of feeding their families while conserving biological resources. Ecotourism is certainly one of those ways, green tourism, and has become a major asset in Costa Rica. Lots of cool animals to see there too, as well as the plants. And one of the projects that was done there was observing the colonization of cow dung by dung beetles. Now that might not sound like one that would jump out at you as something to do if you went to a nice place like Costa Rica, but two young women decided to collect dung from these cattle and put it out in 3 habitats that we're visiting: the dry forest, the cloud forest, and the rainforest. And so they did that, and these are their data. They counted the number of species that were observed on each sample. Now they expected the most in the rainforest, but that's not what they found. The rainforest is number 3, the green one. The blue one is the cloud forest, and the orange one was the dry forest. Then they counted the number of visitors in the cloud forest and the rainforest, and it too was much higher. So the number of species and the number of actual visitors was more in the cloud forest than the rainforest, and both much more than in the dry forest. Another project that we helped with was that of the golden orb-weaving spider, which produces silk that is 8 times the tensile strength of steel. A pencil-sized strand would stop a 747. This has all kinds of possibilities: Kevlar vests, surgical, thread, and especially for work with nerves, because it's so thin and so strong that it can be sent through the axons in repairing nerve damage. And it doesn't cause an immune reaction. And we helped milk these spiders silk with a big wheel. Another place, the Mecca for biologists, is the Galapagos, which we've tried to go to several times. And Florida, southern Florida, with lots of unique habitats and some pretty resistible creatures. This is the cottonmouth. And they do research projects like comparing the mammalian diversity in areas that were burned 5 or 15 years ago, looking at acorn production in the same ages, and looking at gopher tortoise. The young lady is holding a gopher tortoise. Burrow abundance in open areas compared to covered shrub areas. One of my heroes is Wangari Maathai, or was. She passed away. She won the Nobel Peace Prize in 2004 for planting trees for peace. She says the environment is very important in the aspects of peace, because when we destroy our resources and our resources become scarce, we fight over them. Today, we are faced with a challenge that calls for a shift in our thinking so that humanity stops threatening its life support system. We're called to assist the earth, to heal her wounds, and in the process heal our own. Indeed, to embrace the whole creation in all its diversity, beauty, and wonder. This will happen if we see the need to revive our sense of belonging to a larger family of life. This was in her Nobel acceptance speech. Each of us is called to find ourselves by making personal journeys, both literally and figuratively. We need to believe in something, in each other, and in the worth of life for life itself, and to do something to add to its riches. So, travel if possible. We have time for maybe 1 or 2 questions if anybody has them. Yes?
What was your favorite place there?
Well, it's hard to say. But when we go to Alaska, we go to the Iditarod Museum, and they have a film about sled dogs. And one of the things that one of the Iditarod mushers says about sled dogs is that right now is their favorite minute, that they're happy where they are. And I'd have to say I'm kind of like a sled dog, and where I am is my favorite place. Anybody else? Okay, thank you.